What comes to mind when you think of a coal miner? Images of lower class men dressed in ragged clothes and sit all over them is my first thought. Have you ever thought about the degree of difficulty and skill required to extract this natural resource from underground? Men of every age, nationality, race, and skill came to America and worked in the Colorado coal fields in search for a better life, freedom, and liberty. Globally, in the late 19th century, many countries were struggling economically. With the combined use of coal and technology, traveling overseas and across the country became easier and faster. Mining in Colorado increased as well as the amount of immigrants seeking income to bring back home. Coal companies used these immigrants to increase coal production and their profits, and at the same time enslave these miners. The construction of mines, dangers, lack of rules of regulations, and mistreatment of miners are all conditions that led to the quarreled relationships and labor disputes that in the late 19th century and early 20th century resulted in many union strikes, and in one case, a major battle that changed the working conditions and the livelihood of future Americans. William Palmer was a bright young man from the United States who had explored Britain and the methods of coal mining as a journalist. He was appalled by the working conditions of the miners, the use of women and children for labor, and how the growth of the industry damaged the land and air around them, thus endangering the health of the people. As a result, he began to teach himself the art and science of coal strata. Upon his return to America in 1856, he began to work for the president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, J. Edgar Thomson. Thomson sent Palmer and a survey of men to explore the West in search for coal. With their discoveries in Colorado came the vision of industrial expansion in a new West that would promise a better society where business would be more profitable, human interactions with the natural world more harmonious, and relationships between capitalists and workers more amicable than in the eastern states and Europe. As the mines and railroads developed, so did the demand for coal, and his visions of a quaint utopia proved harder to acquire. Mines were developed by exploding rock, using train engines, and sheer manpower. As more and more mines developed, the mines themselves used about as much coal to run the mine as it extracted. Miners would follow veins of coal in the ground using their own tools. When following a vein horizontally, it is called a tunnel, and when followed vertically, it is called a shaft. When a wall of coal was formed, a room was formed, and miners would be paired up to work together. Unlike the hard rock mines in Georgia that did not need support, coal miners left pillars to support the softer coal from falling in, as well as wooden beams that framed the wall and ceilings of tunnels. Once the support system was up, car tracks, compressed air pipes and hoses, electrical wires, air force pumps, fans, and so forth would be brought into the mining workscape to produce manageable working conditions, sustain life, and bring coal out of the mines. There are many dangers in mining, such as being crushed by coal by falling rock, if not supported well. Deadly gases were released from the ore, and the chance of fire when gases, oxygen, and an ignition source came together. As technology for extracting coal from the mines increased, so did the dangers. These machines worked about 5 times faster than mining by hand, but these machines also cost many miners their limbs and lives. They also cost many men their jobs, and the colliers who did remain at work felt more like factory workers rather than skilled craftsmen. Mining companies' demand for coal increased rapidly in the late 1800s, therefore mining and collier work increased. Supervisors were left in charge by the coal companies to man the mines and assign colliers to tunnels, rooms, and jobs. A collier's pay was determined by tonnage, the amount of coal they extracted per day. Framing the mine tunnels and making them safe to even work in was considered dead work, because they were not compensated for the time put in to make safe working conditions for themselves, but was a choice colliers made to either stay safe or take a chance and make a little more that day. If miners did not get along with their supervisors, miners could be assigned to a room that did not have much coal to extract. On the other hand, some colliers would pay supervisors to put them in a good room in order to make more money. The discovery of fossil fuel in the West proved to be very important. Coal also provided new technologies such as gas, electricity, and new forms of transportation. Steamship travel, the need for an industrial labor force, and the opening of national borders brought an unprecedented mingling of the world's peoples in the Americas. With these advances, more and more people moved out west, and the demand for these services increased. This boosted the economy by providing more jobs. In 1870, the population of Denver was 4,759. In 1880, it increased to 35,000, and by 1914, it was well over 200,000. All nationalities migrated to Colorado from the eastern United States. south from Mexico and the majority from Europe. Wage-seeking migrant labor had a long history in Europe, but these so-called birds of passage had become very unwelcome and hostility broke out among the American people. America was believed to be the haven for Europe's oppressed. Immigrants were expected to stay once they arrived. To leave again implied that the migrant came only for money, was too cross to appreciate America as a noble experiment in democracy. With a growing population, jobs became filled and wages plummeted. Thus the skilled white American colliers became upset because the immigrants coming in would be paid just as much as they were, and their pay was being decreased at the same time. There were also seasons for some coal mines. Domestic coal was only mined from the late summer through the winter, so miners at these mines were laid off and had no steady income for part of the year. Colliers would gather together to form a miners' union, which coal companies had no tolerance for. The American Federation of Labor developed trade unions which sided with skilled laborers for better working conditions, an increase in wages, and fewer hours. Eventually, some union workers would pretend to be non-union members, gain the trust of the supervisors, and point out non-union members to the supervisors who would mistreat them or fire them. In return, that particular miner would have a reason to become a union member. Supervisors also took advantage of their duties underground. They mistreated the miners and sometimes put them in situations that were life-threatening, or flat out killed them. There was also an imbalance of wealth between the employer and employees. These are all reasons behind the growing tensions and strikes colliers formed against the coal companies they worked for. On the other hand, as an owner of a coal company, when an oligopoly, control of an industry by a few producers who often act to restrain price competition, is in place, you get to set the prices. Coal prices, railroad freight, and employee wages are determined by the owners, and the rest is profit. When competition in the mining and railroad industry came, William Palmer's profits decreased. The price of coal was drastically reduced, and the price of a ticket to ride a rail car to the west also decreased. To compensate for the cut in the cost of goods and services, company owners had to lower wages. Despite the costly attempts coal companies used to prevent strikes and contain their employees, the United Mine Workers and colliers all over the country felt the same struggles of long hours, low wages, mistreatment, unsafe working conditions, and the company's quest for control. At the end of 1913, strikers in Colorado heard the cry of the strikers in the American East and joined them on one of the greatest labor strikes ever constructed. Colorado mining strikers pulled out of the mines of northern and southern Colorado and started marching through every mine, promoting other miners until they reached their central destination in Ludlow, Colorado. Here they made the decision to stay out of work, overcome their individual differences, and support each other and their families through one of the coldest winters they have ever faced. The last chance for settlement among companies and strikers was held in a scheduled meeting in November 1913. In the end, the companies agreed to everything except to allow unions. Unions, the workers argued, provided a way for green men, inexperienced workers, to become educated about their job, and a way to locally confront any complaints the miners might encounter. The meeting ended the way it started. Nothing was resolved. In early spring 1914, the National Guard, militiamen, and the strikers' armies were all on edge. Tension was rising, and they were all waiting for the destined battle to begin. Many striker leaders have already been placed in prison, and many other Union members suspiciously killed. On the morning of April 20th, 1914, a shot was heard. No one knew who or where it came from, but the battle began. The city was completely burned to ash, and men, women, and children were slain. The estimated death toll of the miners was between 45 and 66 strikers. The truth is obscured because there are so many contradicting stories, and companies try to disguise the truth. A truce was accepted by the union workers, and peace was welcomed. These colliers had endured 15 months of no work and were on the brink of poverty. Although they lost the battle against the companies, they had hopes in President Woodrow Wilson's labor reforms to improve their working conditions. Through sacrifice and determination, they made their point and proved their livelihood to the nation. The skill, pride, and trade of the colliers in Colorado were undermined by the operators and companies of the fuel and coal industry. Forming a union was the only way, in the eyes of the miners, to be treated fairly. An income they could live on, safer working conditions, and respect was what they were seeking to maintain their lives and livelihood as men. The mining companies had different priorities. Making more profit was always on top of the list. This required more mines and workers, working longer hours and doing whatever it took to get the desired amount of tonnage out of the mines. If a union was formed within the company, they feared the workers would gain control. The companies were threatened by this, and thus the reason for containing miners.